Hey, welcome back, everyone. Here we're at the Sun Pirates TCG. I'm Colin, and I'm joined by my lovely co-host Mohammed. And today, since we're just about a week away from the upcoming potential ban list with the World Championship coming up for One Piece, as of recording this video, we figure we would put out our thoughts and maybe some recommendations for what we think should be on the ban list coming up.
Got some hot takes.
Yeah,
and even hotter cards for you guys. Starting off with the first one is Gecko Moria himself. The card's not even out yet, but it's already hotly debated in Japan.
It's just so efficient. Being able to go like Helmeppo, Lucci, plus a Shrinker if you're at 9 Don, or Rebecca Hina, and then play a brand new to like get extra cards. It's just so much. You just get so much for so little out of this card.
Rebecca, Hina, Helmeppo, then use your Murakumo sword and get rid of their Moria and their 4-drop. Just
like this card's disgustingly good.
Very good.
Yeah,
this card's very, very efficient. Honestly, I don't know if it's the problem. It's very strong, don't get me wrong, and this might be my hot take, but looking at like the upcoming format and the way that stuff has changed, and even like decks recently from like the recent Treasure Cups, Black is not underperforming, but it's not performing as much as people expected it to. And there are other cards that I think you can hit to make the card fair, but not make it unbalanced, right?
I also think too, because we do not have set 6 yet in the rest of the world, I just don't see them hitting this card at any capacity, just for the sake of them wanting to sell their product, and Bandai wanting to make sure everyone is able to basically play with their toys.
Bandai's gotta let a brother cook, man.
Yeah. I mean, they could, a couple of things they could do. Maybe they could do some sort of restriction in the sense that maybe this Moria can only be played in the Moria and Perona leader. Maybe it can only be played in Thriller Bark.
That has a Thriller Bark tag.
Yeah,
exactly. So they've implemented. Bandai has done a similar thing in Digimon, where if you're playing one card, you can't play another one. So if your leader is Sakazuki, they could say that you cannot play the Gecko Moria in your deck. Looking at another card related to this, as will become a common theme, Rob Lucci. This card's very powerful. It's a very efficient removal, especially in tandem with Moria. He is one of the 3 namesakes of the RHL combo, as it's known over here, the Rebecca Hina Lucci combo. Clearing 2 guards without losing cards from your hand is good, especially when it puts a 6k body into play.
Yeah, I mean, this card's, my personal opinion, I think this card could see a restriction, maybe to 1 or even be completely banned, just because it's just so efficient, dude. Like just how easily you can clear 2 bodies off of this card between your Shrinkers. Again, it's the biggest issue in Sakazuki, right? Because of Sakazuki's inherent shrinking ability, plus it's the leader's ability to fill up your graveyard very easily to leverage the cost on this ability. I could definitely see this going to 1 or 0. I would be hesitant to say for sure, just because it is CP typing, and I know there is the new Rob Lucci leader coming up in a couple sets that maybe they want to push the CP typing, but we'll see. But I think a lot of people are probably sick of seeing this card.
Another namesake of the RHL combo, Rebecca, is very strong. It gets to cheat a 3 cost into play, so it basically costs 1 mana. It recurs a card from your graveyard. It's a blocker. It gives you some protection. You can play it off of your Moria as well. It's very efficient, and sometimes Bandai just likes hitting efficient cards. It does get to disrupt the Moria combo that return clears a Moria, since you can't Rebecca a Hina into play, but I believe that you could still play the Hina off the Moria anyway. It's just less efficient since you don't get blocker out of it, which is a fair downside. Losing some protection is something you lost. So
I think this card's ability just to be also the ability to be extra copies of a card, it's extra copies of your Lucci, your Hina, even extra copies of your 2Ks that you used early in the game. You know, it's one of those cards that this card just only gets better down the line, right? Like for the color black.
Absolutely. Now hitting this does nerf a lot of the other black decks. Not that they're like overperforming or performing very well, like the blue-black Rebecca leader from set 4 utilizes this card very, very well, since it does have the Dressrosa typing. It's searchable off that leader ability, and it might be a hit that like pummels that deck a bit too hard, similar to how back when all the red cards were being hit in OP02 and OP03 and even late OP04, how the ace leader was just getting caught in the crossfire of it, losing cards that were very vital to its deck as a way to like nerf these other red decks, and it just like wasn't really nerfing it, which is where this other upcoming hit that we're thinking of might come into play, which is the third name in the namesake RHL combo, Hina. This card is very efficient. It's a 3/5 body, especially in Sakazuki, where you don't have to keep it in your hand. You just put it into your graveyard because it doesn't have any counter, and replace it with something that does something. And it just shrinking by 4 is a lot, like a lot. And if this is banned, honestly, it makes things a lot harder for like Moria to do anything. Like your Moria no longer efficiently clears a lot of stuff if you can't play Hina and then use the swords. Like you only get to play a Helmeppo, right? Like if your play is Helmeppo shrink something and then Rebecca into like a Kobe or something, you're popping a 7, you're not popping an 8, you're not clearing the board. They get to untap with their Moria and their 2-drop and then do something back, or just like even untap with like any other like reasonably large body that they have, because you don't have this like very, very efficient shrinker anymore. I personally think that this card has the potential to get banned. It's still played perpetually, even in, as we're seeing now, like the very early set 7 lists. So I think hitting this might be the answer that people don't expect, but that Bandai might stumble upon.
I think I would agree, because honestly, if the intention is to hit a deck without completely killing it, which obviously the leader in question here is Sakazuki, right? You know, the namesake Rebecca Hina Lucci combo, you know, like you said before, not being able to 4/8 Dawn, do that, having a blocker, a 5k and a 6k, on top of killing your 2 guys, you know, I think if we can just tone it back just a little bit to where, like at this point, without the Hina, what's the best shrinker you can play off of Rebecca? Helmeppo? Like, as far as the most shrink?
Probably Helmeppo. Helmeppo is, I think, the largest shrinker that you can play. The next closest would be Suru, which shrinks for 2, but also
they don't attack,
counter
though.
You're losing out of. They come in tapped. You can't play like your Tashigi, that's a more reasonable body, because it's tapped. It can't tap itself. You lose the counter out of your hand playing the Suru and playing the Helmeppo, which is something that in this deck that's very chunky. Like, you'll notice that Sakazuki lists based on the overseas meta in set 6 have a lot of no blocks. The Great Eruptions, the Hound Blazes, the Swords, the Morias, the Rebeccas, or not the Rebeccas, the Rob Lucci's, the Hinas, there's just so many cards that just don't have a counter value attached to them that the deck ends up playing because they're important pieces, that any amount of counter it loses out of its hand is very detrimental. And hitting the Hina here, where it's like a vital piece of that combo, where you trash it in place to like try and get some counter, and now it's safely in your discard for your Rebeccas to get later. It's just a very detrimental hit to the deck that doesn't neuter it per se, but makes it tones it down to be on a more even playing field, I believe.
Because honestly, Hina is like a big reason, or like a big contributor to how Sakazuki closes the game too, right? It tends not to drop like a giant body after body like Purple Luffy. It doesn't drop these crazy bombs like in Yellow, you know, with like Eno going Katakuri into Yamato. Right.
Moving to the next card that's been talked about, honorary black card, but it's not technically a black card, is Houndblaze. Once again, another card from the Sakazuki deck. The card's just very efficient. For 2 mana, you buff something by 3k, so you kind of break the like mana efficiency rule where 2 Dawn can only really be 2k power. Now it's 3k power, and it's removal. It bomb decks a 2 or less. Bomb decking is very, very strong. It's better than KOing, as we've seen, especially if you've seen our previous videos. We talk about just how important the cards in your trash are in the upcoming format, especially for Moria, for Reiju, for Sakazuki. The cards don't want to go to the bottom of the deck, and this card does that. It breaks all the conventions of what is normally allowed for 2 Dawn, and there's been some talk about people wanting it banned. I could see it happening, and it is a fair way to hit the deck, but the deck gets Murakumo Sword, which while it doesn't give 3k power, it still bomb decks some cards, so the deck might still be a bit overtuned if it has access to that in tandem with the previous cards we were mentioning, Rebecca, Hina, Lucci, and Moria all together. They're just still very, very strong cards altogether. So this might not be the hit, I think, but I could see them hitting this potentially.
Out of all the blue cards, this might actually be the most unfair card out of Sakazuki as well, in the sense, like you said, breaking all the general conventions of what a removal spell should do. You know, when you think about something like Gum Gum Jet Pistol, right? It's, you know, you pay your 4 Dawn to remove a body, and that 4 Dawn you invested is not Dawn that you can invest towards killing your opponent, which this card breaks that rule, where not only do you remove the body, but you also just like buffed your character or your leader with plus 3,000, which is more than, you know, plus 3,000 is more than if you just like put 2 Dawn on somebody. Right, so it just breaks a lot of general conventions of like what a event removal spell should be doing.
For this card specifically as well, we were talking about potentially what other card games call a choice restrict. This card isn't nearly as unfair in like the mono blue decks, the decks that don't have access to shrinking.
That's a side note too. When we're talking about all these cards to be potentially hit, that we're not necessarily saying that all these cards need to be hit at the same time. We don't want to completely destroy the archetype.
Absolutely.
It's just one of these 5 cards could be hit in some capacity to just like
the purpose of this
the
is to discuss cards that are in contention for being on the ban list, or what we think have the potential to be on a ban list around like this coming world season.
Yeah.
Not specifically hit all of these at once and make every black deck for the foreseeable future unplayable, right?
Right.
Finally, away from hits for Sakazuki and onto was probably the only other color that people have been debating about hits for, which is yellow, starting with the 10 cost Charlotte Linlin. People have hated on this card since it was printed. This card just gives you no autonomy over whether or not you take a life. So normally you have full control over whether or not you take a damage. You can always count, not always, but you usually are able to control if you can counter out of a swing by either like playing a blocker the turn before or like keeping counter in your hand to counter out of a bigger swing. But this card just breaks all of those conventions. It just says you as a player have to take a critical damage and your opponent gains a free life that you now have to like burn through or eat through. A lot of people have complained about it. It's also just attached to such an efficient body. Like being a 10-12, not only does it like get rid of a life, but if you don't have a way to answer a 10 cost, then you know that you're going to have to set up a blocker or do something else to get out of a 12k the next turn. I don't know if, since it is leader restricted, I don't know if it's necessarily a card that needs to be hit at the current moment. The Katakuri deck is good, but it's not overperforming. It's somewhat underperforming at the moment, and while it is getting powerful cards in the form of reject in set 6, I don't know if that's enough to push this card to needing to get hit, or if hits to Sakazuki will push this deck enough to where it's the new best deck in the format, or BDIF.
I would say maybe if this card gets hit at all, I would say probably 1, and it's maybe not even for a power level perspective. Don't get me wrong, this card is probably the strongest top end in the game for any deck in any color, but I think even with that, it's just more in the sense that we want to not have awful gameplay of of having
Just
to go
like
against like back to
uninteractive
back to
gameplay.
back, yeah, like back to back to back
Yeah.
big moms, like
100%.
you know, everyone's played against that, right? Your category opponent just goes like big mom, you're like, okay, I can play through this, right? I establish a whiteboard, and then they go next turn,
I
second
said
big mom. Okay, well, maybe I can
don't
get
think
out
I'd
of
be
this.
too-
And then they drop the
I
third one,
mean-
and you're dead.
Another card we've been debating is Onami. This is one of the only other OP06 cards that is on our list for debate. Giving banish to cards is really annoying. A lot of the cards that naturally have banish are very inefficiently statted to make up for it. Personally, I don't think this is going to get hit. If anything, I think that this card is a good silver bullet to yellow in and of itself. Being in yellow is kind of ironic for that, since cards that you banish don't get their trigger effects, so using this just helps deny some of the strengths that yellow has at the moment. So I think that this card is not really going to be touched, but I've seen a lot of discourse about people saying that this card is really strong or really annoying or needs to be hit because banish is an unfun mechanic.
Yeah, the way I see it is that this, like, don't get me wrong, this card's like very powerful, but at the end of the day, it's you playing this Onami to trade for 1 to 3 cards out of your opponent's hand because they don't want to take the banish damage, or if they do take the banish damage, unless it's Yamato with the double strike, obviously. But this, like in Katakuri, this Nami basically just trades for 1 card away from your opponent because by herself she doesn't do much, like just a 2-mana 3k, as opposed to like other things you could have been doing with your Don. So it's like she's more particular to specific archetypes. I understand where the discourse is coming from in the sense like we were talking about before, from just what makes good or fun gameplay. But from a power level perspective, I would agree. I can't really see this card being hit.
My stance on upcoming cards is always let players cook before you go hitting cards that aren't out yet.
Yeah.
I think that letting people experiment with the cards is a great way to see if they're actually too strong or if it's just a difference in playstyle, which is going to be the case for Reject. This is another card that people have complained. You saw
I
it
hate
in
this
our
card.
as
I
I was
hate
gonna
this
say,
card.
you saw it in our yellow review. Colin hates this card. It's a good card, don't get me wrong. I think it's powerful, but like we were saying earlier, as a player you usually have autonomy over how much life you have, so the damage it deals you, and Colin's going to say, and I'm going to quote this because I know he's going to say it, that's an illusion of choice that you have. But
It is.
you can you can control if you're at 1 life or not. And if you're not at 1 life, this card is an overgrown T-Bolt. It costs 4 mana instead of 2. Yes, you don't lose a life to it, but tying up 4 Dawn is like your opponent played a jet pistol, right?
Bro, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I've lost games because I've been trying to play around Reject when my opponent doesn't even have it, just because I'm trying to guard too early, and then I just don't have enough resources to work with. But the catch-22 is that if I take too much damage, then I die to the Reject. So I don't know. It's
Look,
It's
we're going to
tough.
go back and forth on this. My stance is and will continue to be Bandai needs to let players cook. Don't ban something before it comes out. Let people figure stuff out.
for this ban list,
Colin
I would
thinks
agree.
This card should get banned.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Not
to
this
be
ban
fair,
list, but maybe
yeah,
eventually.
for this ban list, I would agree is probably not going to be hit at any capacity. In the same sense with Onami and Gecko Moria, is just because we in the West are only just now getting the set in a couple weeks. I think they don't want to hit anything out of the new set when people are buying product and whatnot.
Lastly, on our predictions / discussion, we have 200 million Voltamaru. You all know it. Some of you hate it. Some of you love it. Depends on which side you're on playing the card. Card's efficient. It's especially efficient in Enel. It's going to be efficient in Yamato going forward with the ability to manipulate your life with Hordy Jones, as we discussed previously. I personally don't think the card is very ban-worthy. It's definitely strong, not to say it's not. it just, while it breaks the convention of being like 2 Dawn is 2000 power, it doesn't, if your opponent lives through it, it's not nearly as detrimental as Hound Blazes, where it got rid of the body versus just like capping the body.
Yeah, I would agree. And like, to be honest, it kind of goes in the same theme with the rest of these yellow cards where there's the discourse about, like, the power level's definitely there, but it's more so like the gameplay. Does it feel good to lose to an Amaru? Like, I can see both sides of the argument. If I were to place bets on what Bandai would do to this next week, I would doubt they would do anything to this card. But yeah, I do think this card, it is like a kill condition for a lot of, or basically all the yellow decks, quite frankly, both Katakuri and NL at the moment.
As a color, yellow just becomes a lot of, you have to play around something, but you can't play around everything. Like, you'll hear it all the time in your locals or even at the regionals or any tournament. Like, I can't put my opponent to 1. If they Amaru me, I'm going to lose because they're going to rest my blocker. Or I can't fall to 1 because now going forward, if you fall to 1, they can play reject and put you at 0. It's like you can only play around so many things, right?
Yeah.
Like, if I play around reject, then they potentially just Amaru my blocker. If I play around Amaru, they just like reject my life, and now I'm at 0 with like 2 blockers instead. If I play around Bedge, they hit a blocker Sanji or a blocker Brule out of their life, and now my attack doesn't connect. But if I like hold back my Dawn to like try and do something else and they hit a Bedge, I can't kill them anymore. It's like you can only play around so many things, and that's like the biggest issue that yellow has as a color right now, which is more of an issue with the color identity more than an issue with the cards. And frankly, it's not on here, but my take is that the NL leader should be banned. That card just gets to be so egregious in like set 7 with upcoming cards, and it just gets to see the most triggers out of any deck, because if you're like efficiently using the leader ability, you get an extra 5, 6, 7 life in tandem with all these other upcoming cards. Like, being a leader that basically plays with 11 life just sounds egregious. So that's my take.
And it's definitely one of those, it definitely is one of those kinds of leaders that just, it has a generically strong effect that only gets better as we get more cards in the pool. So I could see it, I don't think so. I don't think right now, for sure, but maybe down the line.
That's my hot take. Yeah. They're gonna ban NL
hot take.
They're gonna ban NL after Worlds. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell for notifications. If you watch the end of the video, please comment on what you think Arvin's favorite One Piece character is. He hasn't been here for a minute, but he'll definitely be back. He's looking forward to it. He just came off of a Treasure Cup top 8. Congratulations to him.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see
Not much else to say on these cards.
Hopefully we'll see what
tell
Shank's
us
number
what
he gets.
Cards you think we missed. If you tell me this card should be banned, I'm going to argue with you in the comments. I won't, but I'll say I did. So,
and just out of a bit of humility or us wanting to make more content, watch out for next week after we release this video, the next week after Worlds, where we will probably make another video reviewing the actual ban list. Dude, I'm gonna laugh if actually there's no changes, to be honest with you.
I wouldn't
be surprised. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
I can't wait for a ban list discussion video to be like, guys, there is no ban list. Let's crack the meta.
Yeah, so we'll definitely make a video.
To start testing.
We'll definitely make a video next week reviewing that potential ban list and either gloat about how right we were or make fun of ourselves for how silly we were. So see you guys next week.
You know what? That's my take. Either nothing gets banned or NL gets banned. End of ban list. See you guys. Take it easy.
See you guys.